Unquestionably, we should take political peril seriously. Number one, I think it's bad for America when one of our two major political parties has gotten so extreme and radical the way the Democrats are. I mean, they're a party that is unified behind hate for Donald Trump. But number two, politically, in terms of the midterms in 2026, it's dangerous. And I'm telling my colleagues, look, if the election in 2026 depends on results, I think we have a lot to campaign on, whether it is securing the border and seeing illegal border crossings drop 99%, whether it is ending wars and President Trump negotiating the deal to release the hostages that Hamas had taken, or whether it is the economy and the record amount of money being invested in new factories and new jobs in the United States. I think substantively, Republicans have a lot to campaign on. Mm-hmm. That being said, and you're exactly right, Julie, there is a lot of energy, there is a lot of anger on the left, and elections can be dangerous when one side is mobilized, is angry. I'll tell you, in terms of fundraising, the Democrats are raising a lot more money because their radicals hate Trump so much. And look, angry, energized voters show up to vote. And I do worry about just ordinary voters who are happy or complacent, who say, gosh, Trump won, things are good, I don't need to show up and vote. There's no doubt if one side shows up and the other doesn't, that leads to a bad election.
Washington, D.C. has a problem, and its name is Ted Cruz. While the system hides behind carefully scripted lies, Senator Cruz just walked into the room with the one thing they feared most, a cross-examination that leaves no room for escape. For 25 years, they thought they could operate in the shadows, but today, the spotlight is so bright they have nowhere to hide. You are about to witness a masterclass in legal destruction. Ted Cruz is about to dismantle the biggest secret in DC, piece by piece. But before we show you the final blow, hit that subscribe button if you believe Cruz is the hero we need to expose the corruption.
The government did not move for a stay of the decision.
Well, Judge Netburn, I want to continue on this line of questioning. In your court, what matters more, the rights of individuals or your political ideology?
I apply the law to the facts.
I asked a question, which matters more?
Well, my political ideology doesn't matter at all.
Okay, so I don't believe you. And I think this case demonstrates that you are willing to subjugate the rights of individuals to satisfy your political ideology. This case involves a male defendant who raped a 9-year-old boy. Was he guilty of that?
Yes, the petitioner pled guilty to that.
Okay, so he raped a 9-year-old boy. He also raped a 17-year-old girl. Was he guilty of that?
He pled guilty. The petitioner pled guilty to that crime as well.
So was he guilty?
I hope so, because she pled guilty to it.
He was a he when he did this.
That's correct.
And also criminal deviant conduct, which the record doesn't disclose what that was exactly. Then, after serving in prison, Mr. McClain was released for parole, but then violated the terms of parole by having internet and was sent back to prison. 1 year after being released again, he was convicted of having child pornography. Is that correct?
I'm unclear on exactly the time frame that you're at, but the petitioner was convicted of distributing child pornography.
Child pornography that was images of adults violently raping children.
Abhorrent conduct.
Okay.
For which there are real victims.
And this individual, 6'2", biologically a man. A minute ago you said that when this man decided that he was a she, you said this individual was, quote, I wrote it down, sober and entirely a female. That phrase struck me as remarkable. Did this individual have male genitalia?
I think what I said, or at least what
that is a verbatim quote, entirely a female.
Sorry, what I meant to say was hormonally a female.
Okay, but that's not entirely. Did this individual have male genitalia?
Yes.
So you took a 6'2" serial rapist, serial child rapist with male genitalia, and he said, you know, I'd like to be in a women's prison. And your answer was, that sounds great to me. Let me ask you something. The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Is that a question you're
Yes,
asking me?
the other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Of course.
Do they have the right not to have a 6'2" man who is a repeat serial rapist put in as their cellmate?
Senator Cruz, I considered the facts presented to me, and I reached a decision
I asked you a
based on what
question.
the law
I asked
is.
you a question. Do they have a right not to have a 6'2" man who is a serial rapist put in as their cellmate? Do those women have a right to that?
Every person who's incarcerated has the right to be safe in their space.
But you didn't think so. You didn't think so. And in fact, I'm going to give some quotes from your order because Senator Kennedy is right. This is not a judge's order. This is a political activist. By the way, the beginning of your order says, at birth, people are typically assigned a gender. I got to say that would astonish a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans think you go to the hospital, a baby is born, and congratulations, you have a little boy, a little girl. The assigned a gender, I know you went to Brown, but it sounds like it's in a college faculty lounge with no bearing on reality. The Bureau of Prison argued what I'm saying right now, that if you put this person in a female prison, there will be a risk of sexual assault to the women. And you know what you did? You said you didn't care about the women. I'm going to quote what you wrote. You wrote, quote, "The Bureau of Prisons claim penological interest in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. This interest is legitimate," that's kind of you to say, "but there are no signs that petitioner is at risk of reoffending. The record is devoid of evidence of incidents of violence or assault during petitioner's incarceration when she was the perpetrator, only the victim. A theoretical risk of sexual assault by the prisoner without more cannot support the BOP's position. No evidence, theoretical." Have you dealt, in what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at a risk of reoffending?
Senator, as I do in every case.
Okay, I know you've been told to repeat the line, "I follow the law." I asked a question. In what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at risk of reoffending?
Sir, I looked at the facts that were before me in this case. All of the evidence, including the statements of every warden who had supervised this petitioner.
You also wrote, "The BOP also posits that permitting petitioner to live among women will be traumatizing and possibly dangerous to them. This concern is overblown." I have to say, if I were the father of one of those women, and you decided that my daughter's cellmate was going to be a 6'2" man who over and over and over again committed violent sexual assault, I would say the entire justice system is absurd, and it is clear on your record your political ideology matters a heck of a lot more than the rights of those women that you endangered. I think you're a radical, and I think you have no business being a judge.
Judge Netburn, there was an opportunity during your exchange with Senator Cruz that you were attempting to offer a response relative to the conditions under which this petitioner was unsafe in the facilities in which she was being held. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to finish that response.
So the facts that were presented to me and what I relied on to make my decision were that the petitioner had engaged in no violence, no physical violence, no acts of sexual violence whatsoever while in custody. All three wardens who supervised the petitioner requested that she be transferred to a women's facility because of her serious medical needs. In addition, the Bureau of Prisons' longtime medical provider testified at a 2-day hearing in my courtroom and recommended that the petitioner be transferred because of her serious medical needs. And the last thing I'll say is that the Transgender Executive Council, which is the body that makes decisions on behalf of transgender transfer requests within the Bureau of Prisons, never said that the petitioner could not be transferred, and never, ever said that she couldn't be transferred because of any risk of violence. What the Transgender Executive Council repeatedly said in denying the request was simply that she needed to maintain her hormone levels. That was the repeated justification for the denial of transfer, but the petitioner had reached full female hormone levels before even being incarcerated. At the time, the district judge in Indiana who sentenced the petitioner requested that she be placed in a women's facility. Her hormones were entirely female at that point, and so the decision by the Transgender Executive Council to deny the transfer request based on this idea that it was only because her hormones needed to be consistent and stabilized, I found was a pretext, but they never once said she cannot be transferred because of violence. It was always based on this idea that her hormones had to be.
Thank you, Judge Netburn. Senator
Judge Netburn, that's directly contrary to what your report
you all
says.
have
That is
had
directly
no.
We're gonna follow.
We're going to
You're going to follow up, and that's how it works.
There is not.
That is exactly how it works.
Look,
if you follow up, you didn't get extra time, and she just directly contradicted her own report. I'm just going to read her own words because it's exactly the opposite of what she said. Your own report.
Senators, I gave both of you more time to finish your line of questioning. I allowed the witness to finish her. I allowed the witness to finish her response. I allowed the witness to finish her response. That is,
I understand that you're scared of the facts.
I have
Senator Padilla. Madam Chair,
open up testimony and then
she has an obligation to explain why she directly contradicted what she wrote in her report. She says in her report, the Bureau of Prisons' claimed penological interest is in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. She just told you the Bureau of Prisons didn't say there was a concern about sexual violence and trauma. Those are directly contradictory, and why are you contradicting what you wrote in your report?
And what are you trying to hide, Madam Chair? No, wait, point of order.
Senator Padilla. Senator Padilla.
Are you going to let her answer that question?
Senator
Or
Padilla.
you don't want her to answer that question?
Senator
You're
Padilla.
afraid?
Very much, Madam Chair.
Senator
You're
Padilla.
afraid of the answer to
This
that
is
question?
no
cover-up.
Are you
Senator
afraid
Padilla.
of the answer to that question?
Senator Padilla.
So yes,
My
you are
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.
Senator Padilla.
Please hold
Clearly,
my
you're
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.
This is
Thank you.
absurd.
To the nominees before us, appreciate your patience and your dignity.
Thank you for your long career in public service, and thank you for your willingness to take on this incredibly important office. You know, I have to say, I don't know that there is a more important position in this new administration than the position to which you have been nominated, Attorney General of the United States. I thought the exchange just a moment ago with Senator Hirono was illustrative. She asked you how you would respond if the president asked you to target his political enemies. It's rather striking because it's not a hypothetical. It has happened over the last 4 years. And I think perhaps the most tragic legacy of the Biden-Harris administration has been the politicization and the weaponization of the United States Department of Justice. And we don't need to ask hypothetically because Joe Biden publicly mused and allowed the New York Times to report it, calling on Merrick Garland, why will he not prosecute Trump more quickly? And Merrick Garland, sadly, he sat in that chair and promised to be apolitical, and he broke that promise almost the instant he walked into the Department of Justice. If you look on the west pediment of the Supreme Court of the United States, just above the entrance, there's a simple yet profound four-word phrase, equal justice under law. We have seen over the last 4 years a Department of Justice that systematically targeted the political opponents of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that systematically protected his friends and allies. And it is tragic to see the loss of confidence in the American people, in the Department of Justice, and in the FBI. I would note, I don't think there's an institution in America who has lost more respect from the American people than the FBI has in the last 4 years. That is a grotesque violation of the obligation of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So I want to start with just a very simple question. If you are confirmed as Attorney General, will you pledge to fairly and faithfully uphold the law regardless of party?
So help me God.
Amen. Look, and I want to be clear for folks at home. I don't want a Republican Department of Justice. I don't want a Democrat Department of Justice. I want a Department of Justice that follows the damn law. And I think the American people do too. That shouldn't be too much to expect. Now, I'm grateful to President Trump for nominating you. I think on any objective level, you're clearly qualified for this position. You have been a prosecutor for decades. You have been the elected Attorney General of the state of Florida, the third largest state in America, for 8 years. Let me ask you, in terms of your practice, how many criminal cases over the course of your career have you personally handled?
Handled thousands.
How many of those were before a jury?
Hundreds. I don't want to overstate, but hundreds. I was in a courtroom for many years. I tried 4 when I was an intern, jury trials. I think you had to try at least 20 in misdemeanor before you went to felony. Then you were in court every day, and I was also lead trial attorney for many years trying many cases. So.
And how many of those cases would have been before a judge?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds as well, but hundreds before a jury, I would assume.
And as Attorney General of Florida, how many lawyers did you supervise roughly?
Approximately 400, Senator.
Now, I also want to clarify something. During the course of this hearing, several Democrat senators have referred to you as President Trump's, quote, personal lawyer. Now I don't believe that is an accurate characterization. As I understand it, you represented President Trump as a White House special advisor during his first impeachment trial. Is that correct?
Within Office of White House Counsel, yes, Senator.
And is working within the White House counsel's office different than representing Donald J. Trump individually as his personal lawyer?
Absolutely.
How's it different?
You're working for the government. You're working for the Office of White House Counsel. You're not representing him in his personal capacity.
And so you have not represented him in his business affairs, in his personal life, or in any of the criminal trials he has faced?
No, Senator.
And you know, when it comes to weaponization, it's worth noting that in more than 2 centuries of our nation's history, no president had previously been indicted, no president had previously been prosecuted until the Biden-Harris White House came along. And in the last 4 years, we've seen Donald Trump indicted and prosecuted not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 separate times.
And 2 assassination attempts, Senator.
I have to say, Javert from Les Mis would be chagrined at the efforts of Democrats to do anything possible to take him down. And I believe the real target in this was not President Trump, but it was the American people, that these prosecutions were brought because partisan prosecutors were terrified that the American people would do exactly what they did in November of 2024 and vote to re-elect Donald J. Trump.
By 77.3%. Million Americans, 77.3 million Americans.
Will you commit every day as Attorney General to follow the law, to follow the Constitution, to uphold the rule of law without favor and without regard to the partisan position of any criminal defendant?
Yes, Senator.
That's what we should all expect from an Attorney General. Thank you.
We'll now recess for 30-minute lunch break. That means we'll be back.
For statutory changes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Ossoff. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, every day when I'm home in Texas, I hear from Texans who are deeply dismayed about the growing politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI. If you are not, every one of you should be deeply concerned about the damage being done to the integrity of the institutions in which you operate. My office hears regularly from FBI agents and from assistant U.S. attorneys who are likewise concerned about the politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI, and this is profoundly damaging to the rule of law in our nation. Last month, a whistleblower brought to light the existence in the FBI of a report, an FD 1023, in which the informant alleges that President Biden and his family members engaged in a $5 million bribery scheme during his time as vice president. Deputy Director Abate, is it true that the FBI has a report making those allegations?
I'm not going to comment on that, Senator.
And why is that?
I'm just not going to comment on information we received, investigations, or
Do you owe an
ongoing matters.
obligation to the American people to be candid about evidence of corruption by the President of the United States?
This is an area that I'm not going to get into with you, Senator.
Well, I understand you don't want to, and that's why people are mad at the FBI, because you're stonewalling and covering up serious allegations of evidence of corruption from the president. Yesterday, Senator Chuck Grassley stood on the Senate floor and alleged that there are 17 recordings of this informant from Burisma, Ukrainian natural gas company. 15 of them are recordings, voice recordings of him talking to Hunter Biden. 2 of them are voice recordings of him talking to Joe Biden. Deputy Director Abate, does the FBI have 17 voice recordings laying out evidence of a bribery scheme?
Senator, I would add also that we've worked with the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah, this is the Senate. We're the other side of the Capitol. This is the Senate. Do you have those 17 recordings?
I'm not going to comment on any investigative matters, Senator.
See, that's the problem. The FBI, and I've had this conversation with Chris Wray too, this is why you are damaging the institution. The American people have a right to know whether there is serious, credible evidence that the President of the United States took a $5 million bribe. And by the way, if it's false, Chairman Durbin just rolled his eyes. If Chairman Durbin were interested in the rule of law, we would have a hearing on these allegations. But of course, the Democrats don't want a hearing on these allegations. And to be clear, if the allegations are false, you know who could disprove them? Joe Biden. He could call for this to be released publicly. But the FBI is stonewalling. Would you agree?
Two things, Senator. No one's stonewalling. The 1023
you just said you refused to answer the question.
Was provided in response to a subpoena.
Okay, then why did you refuse to answer my question?
The pertinent information is there, and I reject your assertion that the FBI is politicized.
Why did you refuse to answer my question?
I just answered your question.
Okay, so yes, you have a 1023. Do you have the 17 recordings, yes or no?
I'm not going to get further into that.
So you're stonewalling. You can't say I'm not refusing to answer your question, but I won't answer your question.
I'm going to answer within the parameters that we operate in.
That's the problem. The FBI has right now an unlimited hubris that you believe you are unaccountable. You don't believe you're accountable to the United States Congress, and you don't believe you're accountable to the American people. And you are doing damage. The FBI is a great institution. When I go home to Texas, people ask me, should we abolish the FBI? Now, I tell them no, because you have heroes and patriots working for you that are catching child predators, that are catching terrorists. But you're sitting there happily erecting a wall to protect Joe Biden. Will you provide to this committee, not the House, the Senate Judiciary Committee, will you provide the FD 1023 and will you provide the 17 recordings so we can assess what is the evidence, the specific credible evidence that Joe Biden personally took a $5 million bribe from a foreign national?
Senator, we will work with this committee, you and other members, to provide the information within the parameters of the process.
Will you provide the FD 1023, yes or no?
I will take that back and we will work with our
So you're
team
not answering that. Will you provide the 17 recordings?
We will take that back and we'll work with you.
So you're not answering that either. Did you investigate in any way, shape, or form these allegations?
Senator, once again, I'm not going to comment.
So you're not going to say whether you did your job?
We do our job to the very best of our ability.
Well, not here. You're not answering a single question to the American people. And you may think this is esoteric. I promise you, millions of Americans are concerned. You know who isn't concerned? Not a single Senate Democrat. We're going to go through this whole hearing. Not one Democrat will ask a question about this. You know who else isn't concerned? The corporate media, who is joining with the Democrats in covering up this evidence. If Joe Biden is innocent, the evidence should be made public and demonstrate that he's innocent. But if he is not, is it true this informant who alleged that he personally took a bribe was an informant the FBI had relied upon previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
Senator, in each and every investigation that we have, all the work that we do,
I asked you
the
a yes or no
expectation
question.
is that every logical avenue of investigation be pursued
I asked you a
to
yes
its
or no
fullest.
question. Are you going to answer it?
Yeah, I'm answering your question.
Was the informant one you had relied on previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
Senator, we run down every piece of information, every
You're not
lead,
answering it then. You're refusing to answer
objectively,
it. So you're refusing to answer the
to
question.
the fullest extent possible,
You're refusing to answer the question.
relentlessly,
Is that
and
correct?
aggressively in all instances.
Senator, your
It's
time is
disgraceful. It's disgraceful, Deputy Director Abate. Disgraceful.
Senator, your time has expired. Senator Tilts?
Chairman, I think Senator Blackburn goes before me, or Senator Welch. I appreciate the opportunity, but
Thank you, Senator Tillis. It's Senator Welch's next.
Passed in the previous Congress. But typically there's a reason that nominees don't pass in the previous Congress, which is they are often the most extreme and most problematic nominees. In this instance, that is emphatically the case. And many of these nominees are quite literally the most extreme judicial nominees I've seen in 10 years on the Senate. Part of the reason the Democrat majority is trying to move 29 nominees in one morning is to flood the zone with so many bad nominees that nobody can focus on how utterly unqualified these nominees are to be judges. The nominee being considered right now, Nancy Abudu, Senator Lee did a good job of walking through her extreme record. She was the deputy legal director at the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that has a long and shameful history of labeling mainstream conservative groups as, quote, hate groups. And the SPLC's history is so egregious that it prompted a violent hate crime. In 2010, the SPLC designated the Family Research Council as a hate group, and 2 years later, a man targeted the Family Research Council using the SPLC's hate map and came in and shot and critically wounded the council's business manager and attempted to murder several council members before being heroically stopped by the building's security guard. The SPLC in 2019 authored an article that accused Republicans, including 3 members of this committee, of holding, quote, open white supremacist views. Mr. Chairman, that's ridiculous. You know that's ridiculous. Political rhetoric is one thing, but when you have extreme leftists falsely claiming white supremacy, it illustrates that you are dealing with radicals and partisan zealots. Nancy Abudu isn't the only nominee that this committee is trying to move forward. This committee also has before it Nusrat Chowdhury, who is another extreme zealot. Ms. Chowdhury believes that America is through and through an evil and racist place. And she's not been shy about explaining that. She has stated that, quote, the structure of racial discrimination in America, quote, is so deep, so pernicious, that you have to, quote, use the law as a tool of social justice. Does anyone think she's going to stop, quote, using the law as a tool of social justice if she ascends to the bench? The most concerning thing Ms. Chowdhury said is she participated in a panel at my alma mater, Princeton University. The panel was entitled How Activism Informs Policy. And one of the panelists there suggested that police officers kill unarmed black men every day. Now, there's a technical term for that statement. That's called a lie. It's not even kind of sort of right. It is wildly, totally false. During her nomination hearing, she was asked about a tweet that came from that event, which said that she had agreed with the statement that police officers kill unarmed black men every single day. At first, she claimed she couldn't remember making the statement. Then later in the same hearing, she claimed she did make the statement, but she did so, quote, as an advocate. She said so 3 separate times. Well, I just, did it as an advocate. Now, most of the members of this committee have practiced law. The last I checked, as an advocate, you have an obligation not to lie. And that is a brazen lie that is dangerous. Now, subsequently, she sent a follow-up letter after her hearing saying, oh, never mind, I didn't say it. The thing that she had justified as, oh, I said it as an advocate. Afterwards, she sent a letter and said, no, actually, I didn't say it. Republicans on this committee asked for a follow-up hearing to ask about her miraculous new memory post-hearing that she didn't say such a harmful thing to police officers across the country. Sadly, the chairman wouldn't give us a new hearing. Another of the judges being considered today, Kenley Cato. At her hearing, I asked her a very simple question. Is racial discrimination wrong? She was utterly unable to answer it. Today's Democrat Party embraces racial discrimination, believes that discriminating based on race, the reason, Mr. Chairman, and you are smirking, but the reason she couldn't answer it is because in law school, she had written an article advocating racial discrimination against Asian Americans. Now, Ms. Cato is Asian American. And she said, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have the article in front of me, but she essentially said that Asian Americans who didn't support explicit racial discrimination against Asian Americans weren't sufficiently woke. They weren't sufficiently enlightened. Now, I think that's a noxious position. But that's, of course, why she couldn't answer that racial discrimination was wrong, because she is an advocate for racial discrimination. Another one of the nominees being considered this morning is Dale Ho. Dale Ho is a self-described, quote, wild-eyed sort of leftist. Now, let me be clear. That's not my terminology. That's how he describes himself. He says, I am a, quote, wild-eyed sort of leftist. He wrote about how he's motivated each day by his hate for conservatives. That's the word he used, hate. Now, I want you to pause for a second and imagine. I'm going to ask the Democrat members of this committee to do something, which is imagine you're in somebody else's shoes. Engage in empathy. There are actually conservatives in the state of New York. Now, the Democrat governor of New York said to Republicans in New York, you're not New Yorkers, get the hell out, go to Florida where you belong. There's an arrogance to telling your voters that. But it's one thing when you're an elected official if you want to demonstrate that kind of arrogance, but one would think that a federal judge has a different obligation. So I would ask the members of this committee, imagine for a second you were a Republican. Imagine for a second you were a conservative who happened to live in New York City. And you look up in New York City on the federal bench and you see a judge who's described himself as a wild-eyed sort of leftist, his own words, who is motivated every day, who gets up every day, and what gets him going is his hatred for you. You know, this is the kind of fellow that should have worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's the kind of radicals who this administration is nominating, and yet that is not the kind of person that should be a federal judge. And I'm going to talk about one final nominee that isn't before us today, but that will be soon, which is Charnel Beckelgren. Now, the members of this committee are aware of just how wildly unqualified this nominee was. She's been nominated to be a federal district judge, and our colleague, Senator Kennedy, whose cross-examinations on this committee have now become legendary, he asked her what Article 5 of the Constitution was. And she responded saying, well, she couldn't remember, she wasn't familiar with that. He then asked her what Article 2 of the Constitution was. And she said, well, that's not coming to mind either. It was a stunning display of her lack of qualifications to be a federal judge. Now, to be clear, asking someone what Article 2 of the Constitution is not some obscure legal gotcha. There are questions you can ask about bizarre, hidden legal theories that would be a gotcha, that wouldn't be fair. Not knowing what Article 2 of the Constitution is, which is what establishes the president and the executive branch, any first-year law student who didn't know what Article 2 of the Constitution was would flunk con law. And I will say Chairman Durbin subsequently said publicly she was likely to get confirmed. And he went on to say that he thought there were members of this committee who couldn't answer the question Senator Kennedy asked as well. I hope and pray that's not the case. I'm confident that on the Republican side of the aisle, the members of this committee know what Article 2 is. Are there any members of this committee who care to volunteer on the Democrat side of the aisle that you don't know what Article 2 is? If you didn't, you or I or anyone who didn't know what Article 2 was would not be qualified to serve on this committee. And I will say, I want to encourage the Democrats on the committee to follow Chairman Durbin's lead. Chairman Durbin, during the Trump administration, explained on a nominee, he said he invoked what he called the Senator John Kennedy test. And Chairman Durbin said, quote, I think it's a legitimate test to be applied to all those who want to be trial judges, and I hope others on both sides of the table will join me in saying it's not enough to aspire. You have to bring to this aspiration some practical experience and knowledge that suggests you can meet the standard required. And I just want to close by this, which is urging my colleagues to be willing to stand up to the White House. I'm confident that many, if not most of you, actually care about having a qualified judiciary. One of the things I cannot understand over the last 2 years is every Democrat member of this committee has voted for every single Biden judicial nominee 100% without failing. And I will say on the Senate floor, every Democrat has voted for every Biden judicial nominee. Not a single Democrat in the United States Senate has mustered the courage to vote no on a single nominee. And to be clear, it wasn't that long ago. We had a Republican president and a Republican majority in this body, and there were many of us who said on particular nominees, this is not a good nominee. We're not going to support this nominee. In fact, the John Kennedy test that Chairman Durbin referred to came from a Trump nominee who John Kennedy eviscerated at a hearing in a video that I still liken to watching a car wreck in slow motion. It was painful. But what happened? When it became clear that this individual was not qualified for the position for which he had been nominated, the White House withdrew the nomination. And it did so after a number of us made clear we're not going to support putting an unqualified person on the bench, pull the nomination back. So I would ask members of this committee, is there anyone, if the White House nominates a ham sandwich, are Democrats prepared to rubber stamp Judge Ham Sandwich? And this also connects to the discussion on the blue slip. Look, I understand politics. Sometimes we put on team colors and you're a Democrat or Republican and you vote with your party, and that for a number of issues is fine. But do any Democrat members of this committee actually care about defending the institution of the Senate and your authority as a senator to represent your state? Because the blue slip, fundamentally, it's not even a partisan issue. It is fundamentally about Article 1 versus Article 2. Now, Biden's judicial nominees have no idea what I just said. But the blue slip is all about, are judges going to be picked solely by the president or by the home state senators? And let's be clear, this is not just when the opposing party is in the White House. When Donald Trump was president, there were some, I think, 22 judicial vacancies on the district court in Texas. When Trump was president, Senator John Cornyn and I, we have a bipartisan federal judicial evaluation committee that puts out a notice, a call for application, that interviews, that selects very qualified nominees, recommends them to us. I can tell you, during the Trump presidency, Senator Cornyn and I, we met together, we agreed, and for each vacancy, we forwarded to the Trump White House one name. One name, and for every single one the Trump White House nominated, the one name we forwarded. If the Democrats in this committee accede to the partisans who are saying get rid of the blue slip, temporarily you'll do some harm to Republicans on this committee by ramming through some terrible judges. But what you're really doing is giving away your prerogative. Every senator who's not even looking up right now is giving away your ability. I suspect Senator Booker cares about who's a judge in New Jersey. But if the blue slip goes away or is weakened by the Democrat chairman, you know what? Senator Booker's not going to have much of a say in who a judge in New Jersey is. And that's going to be true with a Democrat president or a Republican president. Now, Senator Booker and I may not agree on who the best candidate for a judge is, but I do think if you care about being a senator, putting partisan politics above the prerogatives, above protecting this institution. I still remember the day the Senate under Harry Reid used the nuclear option to end the filibuster for judges. And I remember standing on the Senate floor next to Senator Klobuchar. And I turned to Senator Klobuchar on that day and I said, y'all are going to regret this. You're going to regret this. You're going to regret weakening the institution of the Senate. And I said, the result of this, you are going to get more Supreme Court justices like Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas. Now, I said, I'm happy with that outcome. But you're not. And I will say, if you look at the justices that came through, that prediction proved exactly right. Democrats were willing, like lemmings, to jump off the cliff because partisan politics were that high. And so my call, and sadly, I say this call with absolute certainty, it will be unheeded, is for one Democrat senator to muster the gumption to say for one of these radical nominees, no, we're not going to vote to confirm a ham sandwich. No, we're not going to vote to confirm a judge who tells people he's motivated by hate. We're not going to vote to confirm a judge who doesn't even know what Article 2 of the Constitution is. We have a responsibility on this committee to ensure that Article 3 judges have the right temperament, the right character, and will follow the law. These judges that are nominated are not going to do that. And the only thing that will stop it will be if any Democrat senators are willing to insist on the barest modicum of standards and to do our jobs. And I hope and pray we do that.
As the silence settles in the Senate chamber, one truth is now undeniable. The era of managed jargon and unanswered questions is finally collapsing. Senator Ted Cruz's performance today wasn't just another political debate. It was a long overdue reality check for those who think they are above the law. We watched them stutter, we watched them dodge, and we saw the absolute fear in their eyes when the receipts were finally shown on camera. When Cruz said, "It's finally over," he wasn't just talking about a hearing. He was signaling the end of an era where bureaucracy could hide behind closed doors. This takedown will go down in history as the moment the system was caught red-handed. But ask yourself, is this the end, or just the tip of a much larger iceberg? DC is hoping you'll look away, but after what we've witnessed today, that is no longer an option. Supportive. This community is the last line of defense against these lies. We want to hear from you. Was Cruz's cross-examination his best moment yet, or was the game over moment the final nail in their coffin? Drop a comment below with the word Cruz if you want the truth to keep coming. We read every comment, and your voice is the only thing they can't manage. If you're ready to stand with Cruz, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. The game is over for them, but for us, the revolution of truth has just begun. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.